Welcome back, guys. In this tutorial I'll mainly be focusing on modeling of the Coca-Cola can, and so we're going to get started by loading up the image plane through the side view. So I've already set the project and I'm going to be loading in some references, one for the top view, and then I'm going to also load in the next one for the side view. I'm quickly trying to line things up according to my perspective view, making sure everything is dead center, and after that I'm going to be scaling up and maybe repositioning the image plane manually. At this point I'm just looking at my preferences and I'm thinking of changing the alpha map, so alpha properties, or alpha gain rather, to get the image to be a little bit more transparent, and I'm dropping the color gain so that we can have a bit of a darker image instead of that pure white background. So I'm going to click and drag the polycylinder out, and as I do this I can see that my preferences aren't yet set to have enough divisions for me to create a proper Coca-Cola can. So if I just undo this and I quickly double click on my polycylinder, I can type in more divisions for me to keep track of, something like a higher number than obviously 8. I'm also deciding on adding additional height divisions, and then from there I'm going to place that object right in my viewport. So at the moment I feel like I need to bring in the secondary image plane. I am going to go to image, import image plane. I'm going to select my other image and I'll be dragging that out and then trying to line that up with the grid. The bottom image plane, as you can see, I'm trying to get the scaling and the proportion of both of these image planes to line up to the corners, and then once I have that set, I'll then be taking the image planes and kind of shifting them off from the center of the world. The reason why I do that is because I need to make sure that when I model that the image plane is not cutting through the mesh. It's just a nice convenient way of keeping things clean and clear as you model. Right, I've got both of these selected and I'm going to be storing them inside of the layers by adding it to a layer and then locking it by putting it to reference. You can also add an associated color to it, and once you save that, they're now non-selectable, which is obviously great and convenient for me to not be moving them by accident. Right, I think we're pretty much ready for the modeling process. So now that I have the polycylinder settings based on what I had previously, I'll be dragging that out and pulling that straight up. So I'm going to go to my side view and I'm going to draw it up to the height of where I want the can to start. Great, so now from here I'll be looking at my perspective, looking at if it's properly fitting, if the alignment is good, and then I'll be going into my multi-cut tool that's obviously inside of the modeling toolkit. From here I'll be cutting in some extra divisions, and in fact I'm actually using the connect tool over here, and I'm clicking on individual edges and then hitting connect, and that's going to make a loop cut all the way around that keeps things nicely even divided. After that I'll be extruding the top selected faces, and I'm going to use the internal properties of the extrude tool inside of the modeling toolkit and give it a bit of an offset. I'm going to start off jumping all the way to the top part just as the transition of the curve goes up in a straight line, and then I'm going to take the next bit of extrusion and move that up. So I'm having a bit of a difficulty trying to select that image plane. So what I'm going to do is actually jump to my outliner in a short bit. Just making sure that all those things are properly selected. Isolate that, select my image plane, and there we go. I'm going to be taking that and I'll be moving that a little bit off to the side. Get that properly lined up over there. Great, that's a lot better, a lot cleaner. Now I'm jumping back to my perspective and I'll be continuing with the modeling process. So with the object selected, I'm going to go ahead, switching to wireframe on shaded, so I can obviously see the wires on top of my mesh. And when I'm having the same faces selected as I did previously, do another extrusion, and in the options I'm going to say reset settings. With the settings being reset, I'm going to pull those up and then just line them up to the next bit. I'm going to give it a little bit offset to an outer profile. I'm going to do another extrude, reset the settings, and pull that up even further. And that's going to give me a basic simplified outline of what that beveled can edge looks like. Right, the next thing is I'm going to use the multi-cut. I'm going to cut through that section. I'm going to double click on the loop, and that's going to allow me to select all the way around, and then I'm using my scale tool to push out to capture that curvature. I'm going to do another middle mouse using the multi-cut. I'm going to hold down the middle mouse button and control, and that's going to allow me to place a multi-cut right in the center. Then I'm selecting all those edges, and I'm going to be scaling them out just a tiny bit so that they line up a little bit better with the actual image plane. There we go, that's a lot better. Much cleaner. A little bit too far out. There we go. Much better. So I'm actually using my 4-pane view to actually make my adjustments in the perspective while I'm looking at my side profile to see if that is correct or not. And then from my top view, I'm then going to go in and start creating some of the detailed edges on the top of the can, the metal bit that kind of overhangs. So I'll be using a few tools in here. The first thing is I'll be selecting the actual faces that looped around the top section. So I'm making use of the ray selection tool, or you can always make use of the paint selection inside of your toolbox on the left hand side. I've deleted those faces, and then I'm doing an extrude with a bit of offset and thickness, and then I'm actually going to profile that out with a constant edge extrusion. So I'm going to jump to my perspective view, quickly have a look at what the width and depth looks like. I'm going to extrude over that section. If I'm happy with that, I'll be then pulling that out, doing another extrusion, and then keep repeating that same process. So as I do that, I quickly want to explain what the reason why I'm doing it as an edge extrusion instead of face extrusion. When you're doing an edge extrusion, it's a lot cleaner in regards to face normals, and it helps you to work with a lot less information at a time. So I first deleted the top section, and now I'm doing edge extrusion so that it gives me a little bit better of a setup process for extruding that specific detail. I could have done the same thing with face extrusion. The only difference is when you're doing face extrusion, some of the faces might overlap, and that causes some issues. Right, so pretty much extruding, repeating the same process, quickly going to Google, get some new references for the top section so I can actually have a look at what works for me, what doesn't. So I'm going to get more of a perspective profile. Doing a quick search on the can, I'm looking for an image that has a bit more of a profile kind of image. Right, so that's going to be a good little image. It gives me the details of the bevels and so on. So I'm going to make a quick save. I'll be saving that inside of my project in the source images folder, and that's a good place. There we go. I'm going to bring that into my perspective as a reference image. So I'm going to go to perspective, view, import image plane, have that selected, and I'm going to bring it in right into my perspective view. So what I need to do now is just scale it down, get it to line up with the corner of my perspective, so it's more used as a reference instead of the actual right in the dead center. So that image plane selected, and then under the perspective drop down menu, have that selected. I'll be going into its properties, and under the size I'm going to hold down Control and click inside of those little boxes, and that's going to allow me to gradually interactively move that position of that image plane. Once I'm happy with that, I'm going to then kind of use that to profile out the inner details. So next step, we are going to start selecting that edges. I'll then be doing another extrusion and keep on adding those extrudes until I have the profile detail that I'm looking for. I'm doing a bit of scale and repositioning here. There's my extrusion. I'm going to jump to regular move tool, which you can always do by pressing W. That exits out of the extrude tool, and that allows you to move that extrude to a new position. I quite often follow this workflow. Instead of using the internal transformer tool of the extrude, I typically jump to my regular move tool, which is W on the keyboard, and then making my decisions on moving it based on a world position. After that, I'm going to use the internal properties thickness for the extrude tool, and then kind of get that width of the bevel, doing another extrude, and probably start moving that up and over. Having a bit of difficulty with the selections there. I'm going to probably select that inner loop and then move that up a bit or down to get more depth. And then I'm going to have my loop selection, which is shift double click, and that's going to loop that all the way around. And this is quite interesting. The extrude tool for the modeling toolkit is quite intelligent enough to know that if you're inside of the modeling toolkit and you go to, let's say, let's say you go to scale tool and you hold down shift and you click on any of those axes, it's actually going to extrude based on the scale tool. So that's quite convenient. So you don't always have to use the extrude tools as separate inside of the modeling toolkit. You can actually make use of that straight off of your manipulator handles, whether it's your move tool, the scale tool, or even the rotate tool. Over here I'm doing a ray select by holding down tab, click and drag, and that allows me to quickly make that selection. One thing to keep in mind whenever you're doing these ray selections, if the modeling toolkit is not active, by having that little blue icon there in the top section of the modeling toolkit, the ray cast selection tool does not work. So always keep in mind whenever you try to press tab and you see suddenly Maya's doing some funny thing where it loop selects or where it tries to click on different buttons around your UI, that's most likely because the modeling toolkit is not active and is trying to use the Windows commands as a tab feature to cycle between different tools. So just keep that in mind. So continuing with what I was talking about, I'm going to keep on refining the details. So I'm doing a face selection on the inside, and I'm using the scale to kind of probably push that in a bit closer to the actual Coca-Cola can, instead of keeping that massive gap in between. As you know, it's probably metal that's kind of rolled over itself, and that's how we get that little detail if they're pushed up right against each other. So next bit, we're going to focus at the bottom section of the can. And as you can see, the profile of the picture doesn't really give me a 100% accurate representation of a side view. That's more of a slight perspective angle. So I'm going to be going through this a little bit more artistically, follow that profile, not 100%, but just enough so that I can capture that overall profile detail. It's always good to look at proper reference and see what it looks like from different angles. You want to rather follow reference instead of figuring it out of your head. So on the side screen that I have on my computer, I'm actually putting extra references so that I can keep track of what I'm doing. Over here I'm doing some face extrusions, pulling those down, using a bit of offset to pull in the profile, and then after that keep refining, getting that nice clean rounded bevel. Keep on extruding, pull down, and after that I will most likely be adding an extra bevel or so just to round out those edges a tiny bit. Pretty much the same process the whole time. There we go, it's already looking quite nice. Pull that maybe down, tighten up that crease at the bottom section. And this is where I will most likely be starting to put in some bevels. Please excuse my sniffles, I have a bit of a flu going on. Right. So I'm adding an extra support edge at the top section to keep that edge from collapsing too much when we smooth it out. And then over here I'm going to add that bevel as I mentioned previously. I'm using the bevel, so if you have the bevel tool active in the modeling toolkit, you can always hold down shift and that middle mouse click will give you extra divisions through that tool. And if you just click and drag, it's going to offset the profile of the two edges. So I'm pretty much doing that same workflow. I am doing also a soften edge that will keep the edges from being too hard, and that allows the normals to soften out so it feels like the can is soft around those edges, and then where you have hard sharp transitions, that's typically where you want to have more of a harder profile. So the next step is we're going to create some very simplified UV mapping. I will most likely be focusing on the UV mapping for the next tutorial, and for now we're just going to do very basic UV profile. I've done a quick face selection. I went up to the top under modeling. Under the polygon submenu set, you will go to create UVs and then cylindrical mapping. After that, you're going to do a basic I'm going to divide my views into one view as a perspective and top and side, and one of the other views you can quickly change one of your panels to be more of a render view, your outliner. You can pretty much do whatever you want with the panels. I mean, at the bottom section you can see it's the UV layouts tool or the UV editor. The top section, I have those faces selected. I'm going to grow the selection until I have all the faces that encompasses the top metal part. And with that faces selected, I'm going to go to the top and quickly do a planar map from the y-axis down. I'm also keeping the image width height ratio turned on. That keeps the UVs from being compressed or stretched. Once you hit apply, it's going to create a top-down projection for only the faces that you have selected. I'm going to move that off to the side, and then I'm going to pretty much repeat the same process for the bottom. So there I have one face selected, turn on the modeling toolkit, and then I'm going to grow the selection out using the shift and plus the full stop key on the keyboard. That's going to grow the selection out. I'm going to grow the selection out to the top part of the where the metal and the actual ink of the paint kind of meets up, around about there. And then with that selected, I'm going to do another planar mapping from the top section. Now, as I'm going through this, I'm actually saying, right, I want to have that edge selected. I'm going to go to the UV editor and then quickly do cut UVs, and that's going to allow me to separate that section. I'm going to move that off to the side. With that face is selected for that can, I'm going to then compress it down into that UV space so that I can easily texture that later on. The reason why I'm dividing up the can into three parts is mainly because there's two parts that's more of the aluminium, and then there's another section that's obviously the actual ink or the label that's attached to it. So as you can see here, I'm actually selecting that centerpiece and I'm scaling it out until I get it to be more within the 0 to 1 space for my UV editor. and then I have the other two kind of offset to the side. But for the most part, the tutorial was mainly about modeling. I will be going through the UVs and the texturing process in another tutorial, and so if you guys want to check that out, make sure you go and do that on my channel. Right, I think that's it for now. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial, and I will see you guys in the next one. Keep well and talk soon.